Ooh, this is so photogenic with the new fog. I haven't been here with the fog, Chad. Tell us where we are.
Yeah, we're in the Tropical Plant Conservatory at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden, and this is where we keep the plants that need more intensive care and more water. It's got very pure reverse osmosis water and higher humidity. We have a fog system now that keeps everything like a tropical rainforest, and parts of this are heated too for those few cold nights we get every year, and it's kind of a super concentration of rare plants in here.
This episode is brought to you by Herb Farm. We're getting a fresh start to the new year with some high-quality herbal extracts from Herb Farm. They have 2 new additions to their copious herbal lineup, including Panax quinquefolius, commonly known as American ginseng, which is organically grown and harvested in Wisconsin and is known to help give you stable energy throughout the day. And they also have a new adaptogenic polyherbal spray containing ashwagandha, lemon balm, skullcap, reishi, and wood betony, designed to help you relax and unwind. Keep in mind that statements surrounding herbal remedies are not evaluated by the FDA, so I encourage you to do your own research on herbs. There is a wealth of information out there and a new, wonderful facet of plants to explore. So check out our wonderful partner over at herb-farm.com.
Well, this has surely changed. It looks so much more lush, and especially this area, because I remember the rhododendrons and everything, but this doesn't look like there's any space now. It's grown in nicely.
We have a lot of plants that are quite rare that actually can become a little weedy in here, and they're fantastic weeds, so they fill in all the gaps over time, and that's what you hope when you give plants the environment they want. They'll just grow, grow, grow.
Do you want to show us some of those fantastic weeds? Point them out to us?
Absolutely. One of groups of plants I'm really interested in are selaginellas, which are ancient club mosses. They look like ferns, but they're actually much older. And we've been planting many we don't even know what species they are, such as this one that looks like a beautiful small fern that's managed to colonize this whole wall after being planted in just one small space. And then this other plant here is a liverwort, this flattened plant, which they're related to mosses, and they grow all over the temperate zone and the tropics. And they're actually like the juvenile phase of a fern. They actually only have half the number of chromosomes of most land plants, so there's a haploid number of chromosomes. And like ferns, when their spores germinate, they produce gametophytes, which look just like liverworts. So these are kind of like the early stages of land plant evolution, but they're super successful in the modern world. And we've got several species here, and we put them on the rocks, and then they covered them.
In the horticultural world, sometimes when you have liverworts growing in your potted plants, it's considered like a real bane, correct? Like a lot of horticultural people, they'll see liverwort growing and they'll be like, too much moisture.
Yeah, they do love a moist, humid environment, but they don't tend to really compete with other plants that much. But they can cover the surface of a pot very quickly if you don't want that to happen. Then you may not want the liverworts. But we've got a couple types in here, actually. So this wider one here is one type, and then this little one with a stripe.
Oh, yeah.
Is one I collected in Asia, Southeast Asia. That's Marcantia strymanii, and it stays much smaller than the others. So,
look, is this like this beautiful fern? It's like so dark. Is that the natural color, or does it just gets wet all the time and it develops that color?
Those are some of the old leaves that are kind of starting to decline, but the new leaves on this are a wonderful red. They don't have any, it's Adiantum pyramidale, and it's only found in Puerto Rico. Huh. So it's a very special maidenhair fern, but very much thicker leaf than the typical. We have lots of other maidenhairs in here, but this one is able to adapt to a little more dryness and exposure. So it's conditions that are often found in the Caribbean. And we have another very pretty maidenhair kind of tucked in the corner here that
They look much more robust than like our typical like maidenhair that I'd find like in the Northeast. These are, they look more cardboardy like.
This one also is from the Caribbean, from a little more droughty type of habitat, so that's why they develop a thicker leaf. And
should we point out some of these rhododendrons? I mean, they're in bloom right now.
Sure, these are rhododendrons in the tropics are called vireas. It's not a scientific name for a genus or a species, but for this special group of the genus rhododendron, and most of them grow high in the mountains and cloud forests, so they like cool conditions. These are some hybrids from Australia that are more heat tolerant, because a few species grow in lowland conditions, and our South Florida summers are famously hot and steamy. These have some of that tolerance, those tolerant genes in them, but they also love the cool weather, which we have in the winter here, and so they really come into bloom when a lot of the more tropical plants are a little stressed, so they provide a nice contrast. And they also need more acidic conditions. A lot of South Florida is more limestone and alkaline, and so they really benefit from the reverse osmosis water in here, which is more neutral and to a little acidic. And
do you find you have to do any type of soil acidification in the substrate itself, or the reverse osmosis water is acidic enough for it to survive?
The reverse osmosis, it's acidic enough.
Okay. Fascinating.
We found that any plant that needs more acid conditions, if you just give them the reverse osmosis, the very clean water constantly, like basically rainwater at all times, then that's enough to prevent issues with alkalinity for them.
You didn't have reverse osmosis, I think, a few years ago. What did you have to do in order to be able to compensate, or did you find that they were a little less healthy by just using the regular water here, which is a little sweeter?
Yeah, they were less happy, and they had more yellow leaves, and it was not. And some plants we just couldn't grow. Like another plant that really benefits from this are these tropical pitcher plants, Nepenthes. There's
I
a pitcher.
see one down there.
And most of those, there's a handful that can tolerate a little more alkalinity in their water, but for the most part, they need acidic conditions. And like a lot of carnivorous plants, there are just a few pinguiculas, butterworts that like more alkalinity, but most of the others need acid conditions. And this allows us to grow them. And
look at these little begonias hanging out in here too. Little peltate ones.
oh yes, that's a very neat one, whose name I forget. But yeah, this is the diversity of begonias is tremendous, and a lot of them love the high humidity and condition. And they also like to grow on rocks. These are limestone rocks, which is okay for a lot of these plants that are growing on them actually prefer acidic conditions, but as long as the water, they consistently get the more acidic water, they have no problem growing. But a lot of begonias love to grow on limestone, but with good quality water on top of them. So it's a great begonia habitat. And it's also another group of plants that really likes this fresher water are the tropical conifers. This is a very special one. It's related to Podocarpus, so it's Acmopyle saniana from Fiji. There are only 2 species of Acmopyle in the world, and one of them's in Fiji and one is in New Caledonia. And we have them both growing here. Most members of this genus are extinct and only found in fossils in Australia.
Wow.
And other areas, but a few survived.
So feathery.
And they become a small tree in the middle elevations in Fiji, and are endangered too. So
I mean, that looks like it's going a bit more prostrate. Does it eventually try to go up? Looks like the side branches, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, this was from a cutting, and sometimes you can get the cuttings to, over time, coax them to go more vertical, but this one seems to just want to continue as a branch. It remembers it's a branch. So.
Fascinating.
And some of the conifers, when you grow them from branch cuttings, the branches stay horizontal like this, and others of them, even in the same genus, are better at kind of reverting to more vertical growth. And we're not exactly sure why.
See lots more begonias.
Yeah, this is a really nice one for growing on these rock walls. This is Begonia bipinnatifida, so it's because it actually has several like a fern leaves. Often we describe them as pinnates or bipinnates, and so they're basically divided along one axis and then along a second axis. So bipinnates, twice divided.
And is that like, I don't know, is that a chloristicum begonia? I can't remember the name of this one. I don't know if you know this one.
This one actually, I think it is a hybrid. So we have a good friend and colleague who does a lot of begonia hybridizing, and so it probably has some, it may have some chloristicta in it probably, but we're experimenting with different ones in here to see how they do. And
very nice. There's so much to look at, Chad. It's crazy.
We've tried to make the most of this space.
What is this? Look at how quilted it is.
This is a piper, which is, we don't actually know the species yet, but it's one that was at Atlanta Botanical Garden, and I grew it from a cutting, and it's, it almost has leaves that remind me of some Anthurium sometimes. They're really wonderfully quilted and very easy to grow and easy to propagate. And it didn't have any problem with the cold. This part of our conservatory just has shade cloth over the top, so it's not really protected from the cold above, but it does have concrete walls on the side and it's sunken, so that moderates the temperature. But we still get some things that get stressed out by the cold, like this. This is a fantastic ginger, which was looking green a little while ago. And Lindra brevilabrum, which is naturally variegated and that really gets stressed out by the cold, and like this costus got damaged by the cold, costus venosus. But you see these pipers, it's as though nothing happened. So
this costus wouldn't have normally been red. This is a telltale damage that it got too cold, and then the necrotic parts is also cold damage, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So this is normally green with lighter mottled areas, and we can see there are some less damaged leaves in the back there that show more of the color, but we have some in the other house, which is heated, of that same species, which aren't damaged, so we can compare and contrast.
Perfect. I was just noticing the stems of the piper, not to bring it back to the piper, but look, it's like they're knobby. It actually looks a little bit like your equisetum sometimes.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that part.
The knobby stems are fairly characteristic of certain pipers. Some, and this one is really exaggerated. We have one in the other room we'll look at that's called popcorn, because it's got even more pronounced knobby stems.
Amazing.
But in most pipers, if you look carefully, the ones that develop enough stem growth, they tend to have those swollen nodes.
I will have to look next time I see the lowly pipers.
And the diversity of pipers is just enormous, and only really a small amount has been tried in horticulture, so there's so much more. And like this one, this is actually a piper here.
No.
It doesn't look at all like a piper.
Oh my gosh, it looks like a funky ginger of sorts,
It sure does, but then it's actually developing some piper inflorescences.
Oh, I see.
Right there, that are actually fairly small for such a large plant, but you can see there's swelling of the nodes once again. Not quite as dramatic, but lower on the stem.
I think people will start giving a second look at some pipers here. I think when we think of a lot of pipers, it's not like this, like maybe some vining plants and things along those lines that you could become more familiar with, like.
Oh yeah, pipers, they do everything from vines to shrubby. They don't tend to become like big trees, but they will become good-sized shrubs sometimes. And so we have a whole range of forms.
Are those some Labesias under here? The ones with the...
Those are Ardisias, which are close relatives of Labesias. And
wow, I've never seen an Ardisia with like venation like that.
Yeah, that's pretty unique. And you can see one thing that seems to so far only be in the Ardisias is little toothing on the edges of the leaves, which you normally see in most of these Ardisias, even though it can be very fine. But yeah, I haven't seen that in the Libicias yet. So
right. So the Ardisia crenata, which I think is a common horticultural plant, will have those little toothed edges. And they get, do they get the funky little berries like the Ardisias often get?
Yeah, very similar. And like even this dark leafed one is another Ardisia.
Oh,
here that's,
wow, that is cool.
So there's a whole amazing diversity of tropical Ardisias. And though, the few that are in fairly widespread horticulture tend to be fairly vigorous, and like there's actually one that's considered invasive here in South Florida, but most Ardisias are actually quite challenging to grow and need very sheltered tropical conditions. So they're, like this is another one here, which is starting to flower actually.
Wow. I mean, this almost looks like the flowering parts of a metanilla.
Yeah.
Starting out, the way that it dangles and hangs like that. But look at these leaf colors in these. I mean, they're very dark plants. I'm thinking, are these understory plants typically? Like
mostly, yeah. These are mostly from Southeast Asia.
Again, very
Asia.
thick leaves. You got the purple undersides. I mean, these to me would be lovely houseplants.
They sure are. And they're easier to propagate than one might imagine because you can actually grow them from leaves like begonias, which is and they actually seem to be a little easier than begonias because the leaves are less likely to rot.
Right.
So it's, and you can grow them from seeds or from stem cuttings or from leaves. So it's.
Is this something solanaceous? Because it looks like a thorny quercus, but it looks like some type of solanaceous plant.
There are a lot of Solanaceae that look like that, but this one's actually in a different family, the nettle family, Urticaceae. So it's a tropical nettle that's actually used medicinally in Ecuador and Colombia. And so it will really sting you, and I've been stung many times, but it really
I won't ask you to be the hand model to touch the petiole.
But it's, it only lasts about 10 minutes, the feeling of, a little bit of swelling and pain, and then you actually often feel better afterwards.
What is I guess that's the whole point of the, even regular nettles, they would, put them on rub them against your sore muscles. What is the genus and species name of this?
This is Urera laciniata. And
it literally looks like a northern red oak leaf.
It's a beautiful ornamental, and actually the leaves underneath are purple to add to the.
Look at that.
And the typical Urera laciniata is all green, but this one they use medicinally has the purple, which really makes it spectacular. So it's another great plant for leaf texture. This is a Schefflera.
Wow.
From southern Thailand, and it's we normally think of Scheffleras as being very easy, fast-growing plants, and they're even weedy. There's one that's weedy in South Florida, but this one is very slow to grow and slow to propagate. And in fact, we've had it here for about 7 years, and we've taken some cuttings and whatnot. But it's quite sought after in the horticultural world, and we're working on propagating more of it. But it's a very slow grower, but it's
really fuzzy as well.
It's got great leaf type, thick and fuzzy and bullates and.
Yeah. Now, last time I checked, and this is probably 3 years back, there's plenty of Schefflera out there, but they're really understudied. Do you know if there's any botanists or taxonomists out there that have been studying Scheffleras?
I'm not familiar with who's currently studying them, but I know that there is a great diversity, and many of them have not been grown yet. So
yeah, I mean, when I went to Thailand, that was the most Scheffleras that I've seen in one trip, and I'm like, I didn't know.
No, it's
you
incredible.
see like a 2 on the market, and then you're like, look at all and they're beautiful. They're the umbrella plants. They're named, so they have that really beautiful umbrella-like structure. I think that's such an attractive leaf shape.
For sure, and there are ones that grow in the lowlands and are really good for really warm climates, and there are others that grow in cooler places that actually you can start pushing the zones a bit. So there, like some in Taiwan and other areas that are have a little more of a temperate And there also are scheffleras in the Americas, in the American tropics, so which are very seldom grown, so there's much to be explored. And then in amongst them here we have some more of the tropical conifers here. These are dacrydiums, which are related to podocarpus, but don't look at all like podocarpus. The leaves are very, very tiny.
Very delicate, almost
Very
like
delicate.
ostrich feathers or something.
For sure. And so about half the conifers of the world are in the tropics, but they're very little appreciated because they tend not to form vast forests like the northern pines and firs do, but they tend to be, they tend to be found in the elfin forests high in mountains, and some are even in the lower rainforests. But conifers in general, they seem, the virtue that kind of spans both the northern hemisphere and the tropics is that they're great survivors. They're good at becoming very old and surviving stresses of different nutrient stresses. For example, like the biggest diversity of tropical conifers is in New Caledonia, which has these special soils that are very high in metals, and that most other plants struggle to adapt to, but over 50 species of tropical conifers are able to deal with these soils that are high in chromium and nickel, and
Wow.
and they seem to be good at tolerating kind of these extremes that either of cold temperatures in the north or these difficult soils in more tropical areas, or very poor, nutrient poor soils. They're also good at kind of making the most with very little.
Surprised more people don't walk into this branch.
I have a number of times. I'm glad we. And then I want to point out this is a very special tropical plant, actually from New Caledonia. It used to be in the genus Captain Cookia, named after Captain Cook,
Well,
of course.
I didn't even know that was a genus. That's funny.
Which is now been
Related to Captain Crunchia?
It's one of the, even though it's not currently the genus for it, it's now an Ixora, but everybody who knows this plant we all call it by that name because it's,
How can you not?
How can you not?
it's like it got downgraded to a less fancy genus.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and but it's still a valid, name, so we can use it if we want. But yeah, it used to be Captain Cookia margaritae, and now it's Ixora margaritae. But this plant has been growing in here for about 7 years, and it's from New Caledonia, also from the dry forest there. And it still hasn't flowered, but when it does flower, it will produce just an abundance of red flowers along the trunk. So this gets quite tall, and then the trunk can get just covered, lower trunk, with these red flowers. So it's the most coveted of the Ixoras. So we're hoping it might be another decade before we see flowers, but we're excited that it's growing happily in here. I should mention one other neat plant in here. This one got a little stressed by the cold, but it's a Dracaena, and it's a Dracaena hybrid that's called Stardust.
It got really big.
It got really big.
I haven't seen a Stardust that's huge,
And this is one that's about 6 years old, and we brought it back from Thailand, so it's JT Stardust, named for John Tan of Singapore, and it was hybridized by Gregory Hambali in Indonesia. And one of its parents is actually behind it.
Oh, wow.
One parent kind of gave it its structure, and the other one gave it its more dramatic polka dots.
Well, that would just look like a giant corn stalk in the back.
Absolutely, just like those.
You got a lot growing under here. Is this a funky little schefflera with a really pronounced drip tip?
That sure is. It's a slow growing,
Adorable.
but very charming and unique schefflera.
Yeah, look at some of the new leaves here. That's pretty cool.
And then high up in the canopy there is a very special syzygium that was described a few years ago from New Guinea. it kind of looks like a tree version of Anthurium veitchii.
Yeah, it really does. It's a good call.
And it's Syzygium jahoyi is the name, also named for that fellow in Singapore, John Tan, his Chinese name.
And what's that verdigris color thing growing up on the wall?
That is a Freycinetia, and which are relatives of Pandanus in that same family of the screw pines. But most of that family are actually vines like this, and this is a wonderful silver-leafed version that we don't have a scientific name for yet.
Oh, that is just very cool looking.
And it's a genus that's very underappreciated in horticulture.
I know the typical Pandanus is used like in traditional food and cuisine, making rice, giving it a flavor. Do many of the plants within the genus, do you know, carry on that legacy of like culinary uses?
Only a handful. There's that Pandanus amarillifolius, which is the one that's used for flavoring rice and for desserts and whatnot. And the only other one that I know of for sure that's used culinarily is Pandanus conoideus from New Guinea. It actually has a fruit that's very coveted both by humans and by various birds, especially the birds of paradise are famous for loving those fruits. And we actually have a couple of those in the nursery that we're going to plant out next year to hopefully bring them to fruiting someday.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, as long as you're not munching on them, then you're going to have some to propagate.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the goal. And we have, actually, this is another Freycinetia, a much smaller one climbing the wall here. So we have actually probably in here about a dozen species of Freycinetia.
I mean, they look like little spinal columns when they're that size.
Pretty, a very distinctive look for sure. Yeah, I should point out this is one of my favorite aroids actually here. This is Philodendron callosum with its kind of fingerprint-like texture to the leaves.
Well, I could actually tell that this has some top-down light because the ones in my place are growing down, not up. So this is really neat to see.
There are actually a number of really distinctive forms of this species.
Oh, is that right?
From different places. And this is one that's kind of famous for being more upright and having darker leaves, and is a great pot plant. This is from the Guyanas. And
see, the one that I have feels much more textural than this one, but it hangs down, but it's also because I'm not giving it top light. But it would be interesting to see. I mean, it has such a beautiful form. It's probably one of the ones I'm taking to flock. It seems very dark. I mean, it probably gets a lot less light than what we get here, but the form of it is so beautiful. It's a very drapey one.
Interesting, yeah. We do have actually in the nursery another one that's more droopy that also has, very pronounced texture. Yeah. And then there's at least one, there are probably at least 5 forms, but there's one that's actually got bigger leaves and is much less texture. So it's
fascinating.
From different areas, but it's an amazing species and certainly one of the best. Yeah, and this palm has pretty spectacular color. It's a Pinanga disticha from parts of southern Thailand and into Malaysia. And this is a form of this is another species that comes in a number of forms, and this is one of the versions that keeps these fishtail-shaped leaves right through to maturity. So this is mature size. It will flower at this size, only a few feet high, and forms a nice clump. Whereas other versions of this species will develop more classic pinnately divided palm-like leaves and get much larger at maturity. But this is probably my favorite because it keeps these.
And it's a really beautiful spotted variegation, and the new red leaves coming out. Is that new red leaves, or is that something that had gotten hit by the cold?
Those are new red leaves, and that's what they do. And this is neat too because it's one of the palms you can actually propagate by cuttings, because the different offsets will produce roots at the base, and if you cut them off and plant them, you can make more. So Most palms just grow as a single stem, and you can't do that. So it's definitely a virtue. Yes, and then
Oh, let's take
remember
a
if we-
closer look of this one here because it's I could get a closer look of that.
absolutely,
Yeah.
that's a
And you
nice-
could see, oh, it has serrations on the edges of the leaves too. Very
just like many pandanus have
Yep.
those. And
You were going to point out something else before I rudely
yeah,
interrupted
no,
you.
No, I didn't. That was perfect. I didn't know if we had talked last time about this.
I don't think so.
This is Anthurium wendlingeri, which is, and this is a very special,
About to put out
special
a
specimen from Enid, actually,
Very cool.
that she got when it was about 30 years old, and she's had it for about 20 years or so, so it's over 50 years old now.
Wow.
Kind of underscores how plants really don't age like animals do.
Yeah.
They just, if we keep them happy, they will keep growing and growing and growing, just like they were.
What's this funky one with the fruit growing
Yes,
back
this
here?
is one of the,
Is that a fruit or a flower?
that's actually a flower.
Wow.
This
it's
is one
so
of the,
jelly-like.
and you can eat them actually.
Really?
You can eat the flowers, they're quite red.
I mean, could you grab one for me?
Absolutely,
Is it possible?
yeah.
Love
They're
to try
fairly
it.
sour, but they're,
It's okay, I can handle sour
Right.
as long as it's not like super hot.
no, it's not hot.
Start sweating behind the camera.
It's, but they're beautiful. This is a tropical blueberry relative, Ericaceae.
Oh,
so,
ericaceous.
Ericaceous, yep, and
All
they're
right.
quite tasty.
We just eat the whole flower?
Yeah, you can just eat it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
It's got a lot
Wait,
of it.
that tastes like something. Tastes like rhubarb. That's what it tastes like.
It probably has some of that oxalic acid in it.
Yeah. It tastes like rhubarb with a little texture of cucumber. That's nice.
Yeah. Very refreshing, definitely.
That would be excellent on salads because and it actually doesn't pucker your mouth the same way that like a rhubarb would. You know, rhubarb really gives you
Yeah.
a pucker. That is delicious.
And most of these epiphytic blueberry relatives in the tropics are from cooler parts of the higher elevation areas, and this is one of the lowland ones. So we can't grow as many of them as in gardens or greenhouses that have a cooler average climate, but we can certainly grow several.
It is a lot of ericaceous plants need that acidic soil. Do you find that this would be the same?
Yeah, these really need the RO water. It really makes a difference to.
It's so ornamental. I mean, those looked like glazed, like gooey berries.
Oh yeah, and there are other species that look like where the flowers look like corn candy, and so, there are some absolutely spectacular flowers that are within these tropical epiphytic blueberries. And in fact, I know there's one town in Colombia that actually is dedicated to one of these species and its name, and there's a big statue of the flower in the middle of the town because they're that distinctive. So it's
Interesting.
pretty fantastic.
What's
Some of
changed
our-
over here? Is that some type of ficus?
That actually is a ficus. That's a ficus from tropical Asia that grows along riversides, Ficus ichnopoda, and it stays nice and small like this.
I like the saber-like leaves.
Yeah, it's got a neat form,
Yeah.
definitely.
Is that turtle?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's noticing the turtles.
There's a couple, right?
There's about 6 in there.
There's a few. I see, like, they're all underneath that leaf right there.
all hanging out together. These are
Yeah.
New Guinea pink-bellied turtles.
Oh, you had
that-
mentioned those the other day.
Yeah. And the nice thing is they don't really damage the plants much, and they just happily hang out in this pond and
Together.
get bigger. Yeah.
Maybe people will recognize the plants too.
This is true, yeah. Yeah, this is one of the world's most famous plants in terms of the size of its seeds. This is the double coconut, also called the coco de mer, from the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean.
I know it as the waxed monkey butt.
That's a much more vivid description. And that's just what the the seeds look like. And the seeds are one of the big enigmas in the plant world because, you know, they're quite heavy and they take about 4 to 6 years to develop after they're fertilized. So and then they sink, they don't float, yet you have this palm out on an island in the middle of the ocean. And so how it ended up there, or ended up evolving there is quite a mystery. And but everything about it is slow. This one's about 20 years old here, and it still hasn't really developed a trunk.
What are you going to do? It's hitting up the glass, though.
So we're going to be opening up an area of at least the shade cloth to let it through so that it can grow into the open air above.
Very good.
Because this is a palm, that we will preserve at all costs. So
Yeah.
And they come also, and they're dioecious, so they come in separate male and female plants, and so you don't even know for, 20, 30 years that you have one or the other, and then if we're fortunate enough to have a female, then we can get pollen from one of the ones in another botanic garden and hopefully make fruit someday.
So you're saying another 20 to 30 years, or do you think at 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, 20 to 30, depending on how fast they're growing. These don't grow as fast in Florida as they would in a more tropical environment. So
you might have to wait another 10 years is what you're saying.
We might, although its growth has really accelerated since we got the reverse osmosis water in here. It's really
fantastic to hear.
It's becoming much lusher, and it used to only hold maybe half this number of leaves at a time. So I think we may see flowering, maybe in 5 years. We'll see. It's another exciting long-term project. And we've been developing this area into a tropical ginger bed with...
I love that. Look at the ones with the red undersides as well, all the way back there.
Absolutely. That's one of the ginger relatives. It's actually a Marantaceae back there.
Is it really?
Yeah. Look,
wow.
a Calathea from Brazil.
Oh, I could see it now. Look at the younger ones. Or is that a different one?
That's a different one, actually,
okay.
Also with spectacular coloration on the undersides and on the top side.
Oh, wow. Fooled you.
And then this one is quite special because it has a very special fragrance. When you break the leaves, it smells very intensely of anise.
Oh, I was going to say, don't tell me.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah, you could,
Yeah,
I would have picked that up.
In fact,
It's sweeter. It's sweeter, though.
It's not quite, yeah.
Yeah, it has an anise, but like a little licoricey, sugary kind of scent to it.
Very much, yeah. That's a perfect description. And it's from Southeast Asia, and it's actually in the same genus, Zingiber, as edible ginger. And this one's actually flowering right now. It's got inflorescences down there. But actually, we only really see the bracts now. The flowers appear between them, but they're quite handsome inflorescences.
I like the color. They're like a honey color of the bracts.
And they can sometimes appear maybe up to a foot away, which is interesting from the main plant.
Is it like a rhizomatus or stoloniferous?
Kind of short rhizomes, that grow out to the side. And this is an epiphytic ginger.
That's cool.
We don't often think, which has roots that look more like aroid roots we're used to.
Yeah, and they're super meaty.
And it's Hedychium simuense, which is known from southern Thailand and Vietnam, most of which are terrestrial, but several of them are epiphytes. This one has white flowers. Sometimes call it Siam swan.
Great name. Something's flowering over here.
Yeah,
Looks like an impatiens.
This is an impatiens. This is outside the ginger theme, but turned out to be happy here. So
yeah. I think our native jewel weeds in New York are impatiens. They kind of have they pop. Like, I don't know if the same happens here with these flowers.
I think that, these do also, yeah. That's pretty characteristic. And then this really tall one here with the red leaves is a pretty spectacular one. Lindra hemispherica, which has also the inflorescences are really impressive on this.
I mean, this is like a canopy plant.
Yeah.
I mean, how would this be classified? Does somebody still classify this as like an herbaceous plant?
Yeah.
Like, it just is like, it's ridiculous.
Because its structure, yeah, it doesn't have any woody structure to it. It's all held up by water pressure and fibers.
Unbelievable.
But there are some completely herbaceous gingers that can grow up to 50 feet tall, which is
50 feet.
pretty
That's
incredible.
Crazy.
And we have one that's not quite that tall, but definitely
Oh yeah,
in the
I see it.
15-foot territory on the other side.
Back behind the cycads. Is that a costus that's over there? That like the one that's kind of curling a little bit?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's a costus that from Peru. It's Costus vargasii. That's the
Costus vargasii?
yeah vargasii,
Okay.
which often before it was described, they just called it raspberry yogurt, and because of the color of the middle of the central stem. And it's interesting that one of the remarkable things about costus is that there's another stem of it right
Oh
there.
yeah,
Is
there
it?
you go.
Yeah.
That's better.
Is that they've developed mathematical models to describe leaf arrangements of pretty much every plant now that they've found, but costus is still an enigma. The spiral staircase arrangement of the leaves is still, it doesn't fit any of the mathematical models that work for other plants. So
Wow,
they're
is that so?
still trying to.
Well, for all you math nerds out there, math/plant nerds out there, that is a challenge right there for you guys and gals.
And it's got a great name too. They call it spiromonodistiche. So you can say that many times fast.
Spiromonodisticha?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. It has a nice ring to it.
So you can, if you figure out the mathematical model, you can have your name associated with that word for posterity.
Amazing.
And then another neat costus that's actually blooming way up high there has droopy
Oh yeah.
flowers.
Yeah.
That one hasn't. This is costus, and then there's one right
Oh,
up
there's
there.
one right there. Okay.
This is Costus acrianus from South America, which gets quite tall.
Yes, it does. I can barely reach my arms up there. Well, you've covered this before too.
Yeah, this is Alpinia rugosa from Hainan Island in China. It's got naturally has these very pleated leaves, and then underside that's very, very velvety. Got some very fine hairs. And it's a plant that was known in horticulture for quite some time before it got a scientific name.
Gorgeous. So I see the themes here. You kind of put a lot within the same, that have the same form, kind of in this corner.
Yeah, mostly in the general group that includes gingers, the zingiberales, so gingers, costus, marantacea, and a few other things that work their way inside.
Fantastic.
I don't know if we talked about this is Impatiens mirabilis.
No, I don't think so.
It's kind of, it gets stressed out by the cold, so it's lost most of its leaves, but this is, giant Impatiens.
Are these the types that I would see in Thailand, like on limestone?
That's where this is from.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a Thai native to southern Thailand and Malaysia. It looks like it would be from dry places,
Yeah,
but
like
it's actually
like a desert rose or something like that.
It actually likes lots of water, which is kind of surprising. And when it flowers, it has Impatiens-like flowers.
Huh.
And the name mirabilis means miracle, because it certainly seems miraculous that there'd be such an Impatiens, which are normally such delicate, fragile plants that don't have any substantial stem. And that's the very tall ginger there.
There is that ginger that was behind that cycad before.
We'll be continuing forward on the Conservatory tour at Fairchild in the next episode, so stay tuned here and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you're keen on helping the channel out, hit that subscribe button, and the notifications bell will keep you informed on upcoming episodes. Tipping the channel or becoming one of our supportive sustaining members is always appreciated, as it allows us to do more great episodes like this. Additionally, you could check out our online houseplant materials and courses, including the 125 houseplant care spreadsheet, houseplant basics, troubleshoot your houseplants, and the Houseplant Masterclass. And don't forget that we have a new channel covering outdoor gardening, herbs, permaculture, agroforestry, and homesteading over at Flock Finger Lakes. So we'll see you on that channel or in the next episode.